Everyone expected a collapse, a dramatic pause. A woman on the floor, mascara running, heartbroken in public. That's how the story was written in their heads. The CEO canceled the wedding 3 days before the ceremony, guests already booked, flowers already wilting, a future already assumed. People leaned forward, waiting for the tears, but that's not what happened. Instead of begging, she smiled. Instead of breaking, she moved. Instead of mourning what was taken from her, she quietly took something back. People don't realize how dangerous assumptions are until they're already living inside the damage they caused. Assumptions feel efficient, they save time, they remove doubt. They allow people to move fast, without checking the ground beneath their feet. But what they really do is replace awareness with comfort. And comfort has never protected anyone from collapse. The CEO assumed power was permanent. He assumed wealth created loyalty. He assumed canceling a wedding would reset the board and restore control. Those assumptions weren't loud, they were quiet, and that's why they were lethal. Assumptions don't announce themselves as mistakes. They show up disguised as confidence, as certainty, as they already know how this ends. That's when people stop listening. That's when they stop observing the subtle changes in behavior, tone, distance, silence. She saw the assumptions forming long before the decision was made. She felt the shift when conversations became shorter, when explanations turned into conclusions, when respect quietly became expectation. Those moments don't arrive suddenly, they accumulate. And assumptions feed on accumulation. The most dangerous thing about assumption is that they make people predictable. When you assume someone will break, you stop preparing for resistance. When you assume someone needs you, you stop valuing them. When you assume someone has no leverage, you leave your doors unlocked. That's how systems fail. Not through attack but through neglect. He assumed love would wait. He assumed loyalty would bend. He assumed silence meant acceptance. But silence often means observation. And observation, when paired with patience, becomes strategy. Assumptions strip people of curiosity. They remove the need to ask, to verify, to check emotional reality against logic. They flatten complex human beings into simplified roles. Bride, CEO, winner, loser. And once you reduce someone to a role, you stop seeing their intelligence. She wasn't angry. Anger would have been predictable. She wasn't dramatic. Drama would have confirmed his belief. She was calm. And calm doesn't come from weakness. Calm comes from clarity. Clarity sees the cracks. Clarity sees the blind spots. Clarity understands that the person who feels safest often pays the highest price. Assumptions create arrogance. Arrogance creates delay. Delay creates opportunity for someone else. And the moment you realize your assumption was wrong, the shift has already happened. The wedding wasn't canceled because of power. It was canceled because of certainty. And certainty is fragile. It shatters the moment reality refuses to follow the script. She didn't take what wasn't hers. She reclaimed what was underestimated. Awareness, timing, agency. And assumptions never see that coming. Silence is misunderstood because it doesn't perform. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't explain itself. And that's why it moves power faster than any confrontation ever could. Loud exits satisfy ego. They create scenes. They invite applause, sympathy, and sides. But they also give the system time to react, to defend, to contain the damage. Noise gives warning. Silence gives none. A silent exit doesn't ask permission. It doesn't demand fairness. It doesn't wait for validation. It simply stops participating in a structure that no longer serves it, and the moment participation ends, power begins to shift. People assume leaving quietly means losing. They think if there are no raised voices, no accusations, no public breakdown, then nothing significant has happened. But silence is often the result of deep understanding. When someone knows exactly how a system works, they don't fight it. They step out of it. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't try to be understood. Those are emotional reactions meant for people who still believe the other side is listening. Silence appears when that belief is gone. A clean exit unsettles control. It removes the opponent's ability to respond effectively. There's nothing to deny, nothing to counter, nothing to spin, just absence. And absence forces explanation from the side that stayed. Power hates unanswered questions. It hates gaps in the narrative. It hates not knowing where the threat went. Silence creates all three at once. When she left without drama, the imbalance became visible. He had to talk. He had to justify. He had to manage perception. She didn't. That asymmetry is where influence quietly transfers. Silent exits also protect energy. They don't waste strength on proving harm. They don't spend time convincing others of pain. They conserve focus for what comes next. And what comes next is usually growth that the old system never anticipated. People think closure requires conversation. But closure is an internal decision, not a negotiated agreement. Once that decision is made, words become unnecessary. The most powerful exits happen when someone leaves before the collapse, before resentment turns into bitterness, before love turns into humiliation. Silence preserves dignity, and dignity is a form of leverage. Systems only function when people remain inside them. The moment someone leaves without resistance, the system loses more than a participant. It loses certainty. That's why silent exits feel threatening. They reveal that control was never absolute, that loyalty was conditional, that presence was a choice, not an obligation. And by the time the noise starts, the shift has already happened. Control feels strongest when it's never questioned, when decisions are made quickly, when outcomes seem guaranteed. But control has a weakness most people ignore. It depends on what you fail to see. Underestimating awareness is the fastest way power dissolves, because awareness doesn't confront. It observes. It doesn't interrupt. It waits. And while control is busy asserting itself, awareness is mapping the entire terrain. The CEO believed control came from authority, from money, from the ability to cancel, approve, and replace. He didn't notice how often he stopped explaining, how often decisions were announced instead of discussed, how often confidence turned into dismissal. Those are tells. And awareness catches tells. She noticed the shift when questions stopped being welcomed, when certainty replaced curiosity, when empathy was treated as inefficiency. Awareness doesn't need proof. It reads patterns. And patterns repeat before they break. Control assumes attention. It assumes presence means agreement. It assumes silence means alignment. But awareness knows silence can also mean evaluation. The moment someone starts observing instead of engaging, control is already weakening. He underestimated her because he thought awareness was passive. He believed that if someone wasn't challenging him, they weren't capable of strategy. That mistake is common. Loud resistance feels dangerous. Quiet understanding feels harmless. It isn't. Awareness accumulates information without triggering defense. It sees inconsistencies. It sees timing. It understands when power is strongest and when it's careless. And carelessness is the window control never guards. Control demands speed. Awareness uses patience. Control forces decisions. Awareness waits for leverage. That difference determines who leaves wounded and who leaves intact. She didn't need permission. She didn't need confrontation. She needed the moment when control felt safest. That's when awareness moves. People lose power not because they are challenged, but because they become predictable. Control repeats patterns. Awareness anticipates them, and anticipation turns into advantage. He thought the cancellation ended the story. Awareness understood it opened one. He believed control meant choosing the ending. Awareness knew endings belong to those who see the whole arc. The most dangerous person in any system isn't the rebel. It's the observer who understands the system better than the one running it. Because awareness doesn't need to win arguments. It only needs timing. By the time control realizes awareness has acted, the ground has already shifted. Beneath it, intelligence rarely introduces itself. It doesn't need recognition to function. It doesn't demand space in the room. It watches first. It listens longer than others think is necessary. And because of that, it's almost always underestimated. People expect intelligence to look impressive, to speak confidently, to dominate conversations, to correct others publicly. But real intelligence often does the opposite. It stays quiet while collecting context. It lets others reveal themselves through repetition, through ego, through careless certainty. The loudest voice in the room usually believes it is the smartest. That belief becomes a blindfold. When someone is busy asserting how much they know, they stop noticing what they don't. And that's where quiet intelligence begins to move. She didn't interrupt him when he explained the future, as if it was already decided. She didn't challenge his conclusions or expose the gaps in his logic. She allowed him to continue believing he was alone at the top of the thinking ladder. That belief made him careless. Intelligence understands human behavior before it focuses on outcomes. It reads confidence shifts. It notices when respect turns into assumption, when collaboration becomes instruction. Those changes speak louder than words. When someone underestimates you, they reveal their hand. They show you where they feel untouchable. They show you what they protect and what they ignore. Quiet intelligence uses that information with precision, not emotion. There's a difference between silence and emptiness. Silence can be full of calculation, full of memory, full of understanding. People confuse the absence of noise with the absence of depth. And that confusion is expensive. She was never invisible. She was simply unannounced. And unannounced intelligence moves without resistance, because no one prepares for it. Intelligence doesn't rush to prove itself. Proof is unnecessary when clarity exists. Instead, it waits for alignment, for the moment when action will have maximum impact and minimum exposure. Those who underestimate quiet thinkers often assume reactions will be emotional, that anger will surface, that pain will demand acknowledgement. But intelligence doesn't leak emotion when emotion would compromise strategy. The most unsettling thing for someone who relies on dominance is realizing they were being observed the entire time, that their certainty provided cover for someone else's preparation. By the time intelligence acts, the noise has already exhausted itself, and what remains is movement that no one saw coming. Chaos feels powerful in the moment. It feels expressive. It feels like truth spilling out without restraint. But systems don't respond to chaos with respect. They respond by containing it. Calm is different. Calm doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't try to dominate the room. It moves steadily without leaking intention. And systems, whether emotional or structural, make room for calm because calm doesn't threaten stability. It quietly redirects it. People think losing control makes them real, that emotional explosions prove sincerity. But chaos is easy to predict. Systems are built to absorb it. They expect anger. They prepare for tears. They know how to wait out emotional storms. Calm disrupts that expectation. When someone remains composed in moments meant to break them, it creates uncertainty. Calm removes the system's ability to frame the narrative. There's no outburst to label, no reaction to dismiss, no behavior to discredit. She didn't rush to explain herself. She didn't justify her silence. She didn't defend her dignity. Calm allowed her to move while everyone else was still reacting. Systems reward those who don't drain energy, those who don't slow processes down with emotional debris. Calm keeps pathways open. It keeps access intact. It allows movement where chaos creates barriers. Chaos makes noise. Calm makes progress. When emotions take over, timing collapses. Decisions become rushed. Words spill where silence would have protected leverage. Chaos hands control back to the system it's trying to fight. Calm keeps control internal. She understood that panic would cost her options, that grief expressed too loudly would close doors quietly. Calm preserved her clarity, and clarity preserves choice. Systems don't elevate the loudest person. They elevate the most stable one. Stability looks like confidence without urgency. It looks like patience without hesitation. It looks like strength that doesn't need witnesses. Calm creates trust even in departure. It prevents retaliation. It avoids escalation. It lets exits remain clean. And clean exits leave no fingerprints. Chaos demands resolution. Calm creates distance. And distance creates safety. People underestimate how threatening calm can be. It signals that someone is not desperate, not reactive, not dependent. And systems are designed to exploit dependency, not independence. The moment she stopped reacting emotionally, the balance shifted. The system no longer had leverage, no longer had a predictable response to manipulate. Calm didn't mean she wasn't hurt. It meant she chose control over performance. And systems always reward the person who doesn't need to perform. Certainty feels like safety. It feels like standing on solid ground with answers locked in place. It removes hesitation. It removes doubt. And that's why people cling to it so tightly, even when it quietly starts costing them everything. Certainty convinces people they've already won, that the future is predictable, that the variables are controlled. Once that belief sets in, curiosity disappears. Questions feel unnecessary. Listening feels like a waste of time. That's when loss begins. The most dangerous loss isn't money. Money can be recovered. It isn't reputation. Reputation can be rebuilt. It isn't even people. People leave and arrive all the time. The most dangerous loss is certainty, because once it's gone, everything feels unstable at once. He was certain she would stay. Certain she needed him more than he needed her. Certain that canceling the wedding would end the conversation on his terms. Certainty made him slow. It made him careless. It made him blind. Certainty dulls perception. It convinces people there's nothing left to notice. No shifts in tone. No pauses in conversation. No emotional distance growing quietly between words. When certainty takes over, awareness shuts down. People stop checking the locks when they're certain no one is leaving. Certainty also creates entitlement. The belief that outcomes are owed, that loyalty is automatic, that presence is guaranteed. And entitlement always underestimates choice. She felt the certainty long before the cancellation. She felt it in the way decisions were delivered, not discussed, in the way the future was spoken about as if it had already been agreed upon. Certainty doesn't ask. It declares, and declarations ignore consent. When certainty cracks, panic follows. Because without certainty, control feels fragile. Without certainty, power feels temporary. Without certainty, people are forced to confront how much they assumed instead of earned. That realization is destabilizing. Certainty makes people predictable. Predictability creates openings. Openings allow others to move without resistance. When someone believes the outcome is fixed, they stop guarding the process. That's how certainty betrays its owner. She didn't need certainty to leave. She needed clarity. And clarity survives uncertainty. It adapts. It moves. It doesn't freeze when the future becomes unclear. The moment certainty was lost, everything else followed. Control weakened. Authority questioned itself. Confidence became performance. And performance always leaks fear. People talk about heartbreak as the worst loss. The heartbreak hurts because certainty dies with it. The certainty that tomorrow will look the same. The certainty that roles won't change. The certainty that someone will still be there. Once certainty disappears, reality rushes in. And reality doesn't negotiate.